mean, it's one of the most difficult cases that I have dealt with in my 17 and a half years on the bench. I can't imagine what those children went through in their last minutes, the fear, the pain, the suffering. It's incomprehensible.
In a quiet Arizona apartment, two young siblings went to bed, never to wake up again. Behind the closed doors of their small home, a mother's mind unraveled into a place few dare to imagine. It happened without warning. No screaming neighbors, no desperate cries for help, just a deadly silence that swallowed the night. Tempe, Arizona, a peaceful community where parents walked their children to school, where kids laughed in playgrounds, and where neighbors shared weekend barbecues. It was the kind of place where violent crime felt like a story from somewhere else. Until that May morning in 2021, when everything changed. Inside apartment number 25, a nightmare unfolded. Two children, 9-year-old Mia and 7-year-old Kai, never made it to school that day. Their tiny beds became crime scenes. Their dreams were cut short by the person who once held them in her arms. The details that emerged sent shockwaves through the city. The weapon? A meat cleaver. The wounds? Too many to count. The brutality? Beyond comprehension. Yet, the mother, Yui Inoue, would later tell police she couldn't remember doing it. She said she saw blood but heard no screams. She spoke of voices in her head. She told stories of shadows she claimed no one else could see. For the community, the heartbreak was immediate and raw. For the officers first on the scene, it was a memory they would carry forever. For the classmates left behind, it was a lesson in fear they never asked for. But this is more than a story about a crime. This is about the cracks that were always there. The mental illness that went untreated. The warnings that went unheard. The violence that was whispered behind closed doors never truly stopped. And the system, overwhelmed and overworked, tried to protect two innocent children but failed. Before we move forward, we must pause. This story involves child harm, mental health crises, and domestic violence. These are topics that can be deeply upsetting. Viewer discretion is advised. The facts, as we know them, are haunting. Two children were killed in their sleep. A mother found at the police station hours later, telling a story that made no sense. A past filled with troubling signs. A marriage full of fights, police calls, and accusations. But how did it come to this? Could this tragedy have been prevented? And when the system breaks down, who is left to pick up the pieces? These are the questions we'll explore. But as we peel back the layers of this heartbreaking case, the answers become more confusing than anyone expected. Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It might seem like a small action, but it helps us reach more people, create awareness, and keep these important conversations going. Together, we can shine a light on stories that deserve to be heard. Now let's get into the case. Yui Inoue didn't always live in Arizona. She was born in Japan, in a small town where the pace was slower, the expectations heavier, and the idea of seeking help almost unspoken. She moved to the United States in the early 2000s, chasing dreams that felt just out of reach. Arizona was supposed to be a fresh start, a place to build a family, a better life. But for Yui, the American dream came with a price. She struggled with English. She struggled to find friends. Most days, she struggled to feel seen. And in a country that often praised independence, she found herself drowning in isolation. Her world became smaller with each passing year. Her husband, Daisuke, became her translator, her guide, and eventually, her adversary. There were stories told behind closed doors, of arguments that shook the walls, of police visits that ended with hushed apologies and promises to do better. But those promises faded, and the cracks grew wider. Yui's mental health unraveled quietly. At first, it was sadness, then fear, then something harder to explain. She spoke of shadows in the corners of rooms, of voices no one else heard. She went to a doctor once. She was given medication, but the stigma followed her like a shadow. In her culture, To admit mental illness was to admit weakness. So, she stopped going. Mia and Kai, their children, were the bright spots in her life. Mia, the older sister, loved art. She drew pictures of princesses, of animals, of her family, always smiling. Kai, the younger brother, dreamed of becoming an astronaut. He loved space, rockets, and the stars. At school, they were known for their kindness. Their teachers described them as gentle, polite, and eager to please. Classmates would later say they never saw the sadness behind their smiles. But at home, the picture was different. The marriage between Yui and Daisuke collapsed under the weight of resentment and fear. Their divorce became a battlefield, full of accusations, custody fights, and emotional warfare. The court gave Yui custody. It was a decision that, in hindsight, would haunt everyone involved. The police had been to the apartment before. Once, for a domestic violence call that ended with no charges filed. Another time, Yui claimed her son was possessed by demons. There were reports, warnings, cases opened, and quietly closed. The Department of Child Safety knew her name. Yet, every time, the children stayed. Neighbors told stories of hearing strange noises at night, of seeing the children sitting outside, alone, long past bedtime. But no one ever imagined it would come to this. And then, the first twist. 2 months before the murders, Yui was taken to a psychiatric hospital after a violent outburst involving Kai. She said he was a threat. She said she had to protect him from evil spirits. For a moment, the system seemed to step in. For a moment, it looked like help was finally coming. But the moment passed. She was released after a short stay. The children were returned to her care. No follow-up. No mandatory counseling. The caseworker's file stayed open, but gathered dust on a crowded desk. No one knew that, behind those apartment walls, Yui was slipping further from reality. She stopped sleeping. She stopped eating. She started telling people the children were no longer her children, that they had been replaced. No one knew. Or maybe, no one wanted to know. Let's think about this for a moment. If the warnings were everywhere, why did no one see the storm coming? And when does a cry for help become a countdown to tragedy? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. May 15th, 2021. It was a Saturday like any other. Or at least, it seemed that way. Mia and Kai had spent the day inside the apartment. Neighbors noticed the blinds were drawn, and the porch light was left off. Some said they heard the TV playing cartoons late into the night. Others heard nothing at all. But behind the walls, something had shifted. That night, Yui Inoue prepared the children for bed, as she always did. She tucked them in, whispered goodnight. There was no sign of what was coming. Yet, sometime after midnight, Yui packed a small bag. Inside were her passport, her wedding ring, and a few personal items. Things that made no sense until later. At precisely 3 a.m., she walked into the Tempe Police Department. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't crying. She sat quietly in the lobby, waiting for an officer to notice her. When they did, she spoke softly, almost too softly. She told them she heard voices. Voices telling her to harm her children. She said there was blood. Officers rushed to the apartment. What they found would haunt them. Mia and Kai were found in their beds, still dressed in their pajamas. The scene inside was one no one wanted to describe. Even the most experienced first responders struggled to speak of it without their voices breaking. The investigators would later piece together a grim puzzle. The weapon was found on the kitchen floor. A meat cleaver. It wasn't the first time Yui had threatened to harm her children. But this time she followed through. And the level of violence was almost beyond comprehension. Forensic analysis revealed the unspeakable horror. Both Mia and Kai had suffered more than 100 blows each. The brutality of the attack left no doubt that this was not an impulsive act, but a frenzied, sustained assault. The children's bodies bore not only fatal injuries but clear signs of defensive wounds, showing they had tried desperately to fight back, to protect themselves, to survive. The sheer number of wounds, the nature of the injuries, Even hardened detectives admitted it was among the worst they had ever seen. It painted a devastating picture of two young lives ended in terror and agony at the hands of the one person they should have been safest with, their mother. There were signs of cleaning. The bloodied clothes had been replaced. The walls were wiped down. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle, and one detail left investigators frozen in disbelief. Yui had taken a shower, as if she was preparing to leave. At the station, her behavior was irrational. She remained calm. She answered questions, though much of what she said didn't make sense. She claimed she couldn't remember what happened. She insisted she had been hearing voices all night. She said the children were with her parents now. Investigators pressed her, but she offered nothing more. There were no tears, no breakdown, no visible guilt. The arrest came swiftly. Yui Inoue was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. But the twists didn't stop there. In the days that followed, detectives discovered she had been researching flights to Japan just days before the murders. They found internet searches about child custody laws, about mental health hospitals, about death. Her ex-husband, Daisuke, told police she had called him the night before, leaving a voicemail that made no sense. She spoke in riddles. She told him to take care of the children. She told him she wouldn't need them anymore. He never called back. And in that silence, the clock ran out. For the officers who sat across from Yui during the first interviews, it became clear. She wasn't just confused. She had made a choice. But what was the trigger? Was it the looming divorce hearing scheduled for the next month? Was it the voices she claimed whispered to her every night? Or was it something even she couldn't explain? She told them she heard voices. She told them the children were safe. But was she lost in a world of madness? Or was she hiding a truth she never wanted to face? And if the line between illness and intent blurs, who do we hold responsible? The investigation into Mia and Kai's deaths moved quickly, but what detectives uncovered went far beyond one night of horror. Inside the apartment, forensic teams worked through the night. Every surface told part of the story. The children's beds, undisturbed. The kitchen, spotless, except for the weapon. There were no signs of struggle, no broken glass, no forced entry. It was as if the crime had taken place in a world where no one fought back. The autopsy reports, though grim, painted a clear picture, handled with care and without unnecessary detail. The children were asleep when the attack began. There was no evidence they ever woke up, no defensive wounds. For the investigators, that small mercy was the only comfort. But as the evidence piled up, so did the questions. They looked deeper into Yui Inoue's past. What they found was a trail of warnings. Warnings that were filed, documented, and too often dismissed. The Arizona Department of Child Safety had opened cases on the family before. Reports of neglect. Reports of strange behavior. In March of 2021, just 2 months before the murders, Yui had been placed on a mental health hold after telling authorities her son was possessed. She had tried to attack him with scissors. But once again, after a brief hospital stay, she was released. The children were sent back home. It wasn't just DCS records. There were 911 calls. At least 3 in the previous year. Calls from neighbors reporting yelling. Calls from Yui herself, accusing her husband of poisoning the children. None of the calls led to arrests. The reports were written, then quietly closed. Court documents revealed something darker still. Threats against Daisuke. Letters sent to him, accusing him of hiding the children's souls. She had told a counselor once that her husband was controlling her mind, that the children were imposters. It sounded bizarre, until it wasn't. Investigators reached out to mental health experts. They reviewed Yui's behavior, her statements, and her long-documented history of paranoia and psychosis. Experts pointed to a likely diagnosis: untreated schizophrenia with violent delusions. But another layer emerged, a layer no one had fully explored before. In Yui's upbringing, mental illness was seen as shameful, something to hide, something to bury deep inside. Seeking help was rare. Speaking openly about it, even rarer. She had told a caseworker once that her family in Japan would be disgraced if they found out she was seeing a therapist. The clash between culture, mental health, and the American system created a perfect storm, and the children became its most tragic victims. By the time all the reports were gathered, all the interviews done, one truth became clear. The signs were everywhere. The system saw them. And still, the children stayed. How many warnings does it take before someone listens? And when the system designed to protect becomes the system that looks away, who carries the blame? Please share your thoughts in the comment section. The trial of Yui Inoue began amidst a cloud of confusion and heartbreak. The charges were clear: 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of child abuse. The evidence was overwhelming. Yet at the heart of it all, the question lingered. Could Yui Inoue truly be held accountable for her actions if she wasn't in control of her mind? Inoue's defense team argued that she had been a victim of her mind. They presented psychiatric evaluations suggesting that she was suffering from severe mental health issues, perhaps even a psychotic break at the time of the murders. They claimed she had heard voices, that she wasn't capable of fully understanding the horrific acts she had committed. Her lawyer, standing firm, painted a picture of a woman in torment, trapped in a mental prison. She had been hospitalized multiple times before, and the defense suggested that the system had failed to intervene and provide the support she so desperately needed. But as the trial progressed, a shocking revelation came to light. During a recess, it was discovered that Inoue had privately confessed to a fellow inmate about her actions. According to the inmate's testimony, Inoue had been very calm when recounting the murders. She reportedly said, "I had no choice. It was them or me." These words sent a wave of disbelief through the courtroom. Was it truly a psychotic break, or was this cold, calculated thinking amid a momentary lapse? As the prosecution called forth witnesses, the courtroom grew heavy with emotion. Teachers from Kyrene del Cielo Elementary spoke about Mia and Kai, the joy they brought to the classroom, their bright smiles, and their laughter. Family members also stood before the jury, fighting back tears as they shared stories of the siblings' innocence. They described how Mia loved to draw and how Kai adored sports. But beneath the tears, there was an anger that seemed to pierce through, an anger at a mother who should have protected them. One of Mia's closest friends testified, describing the shock of learning her friend would never return to class. Her voice wavered as she spoke, and the entire room felt the weight of her words. Just when it seemed like the defense had made its case, a surprising turn occurred. During a cross-examination, Inoue's own words began to contradict her defense's claims. She seemed more aware than ever of the proceedings, more in control of her emotions than she had appeared during her initial arrest. Her denial of the crime seemed less like confusion and more like deflection, an effort to avoid the brutal truth. As the prosecutor grilled her about her final moments with Mia and Kai, Inoue's response was heartbreaking. "They were going to leave me. They were taking everything from me." It wasn't the answer of someone unaware of her actions, but rather someone filled with regret, guilt, and fear. Could it be that Yui Inoue was fighting something far darker than mere psychosis? Then, in one of the most heart-wrenching moments of the trial, a letter was presented to the court. It was a letter written by Inoue's ex-husband, the father of Mia and Kai. His words were simple but cutting. "I don't know how to forgive you, but I know I'll never forget what you did. Our children deserved better." Inoue didn't react to the letter. Her face was as cold as stone. The emotional weight of that letter reverberated throughout the room, leaving no one untouched by its raw truth. As the trial came to a close, the jury deliberated. Their decision was swift, yet the air remained thick with uncertainty. On one hand, there was the overwhelming evidence, the crime scene, the forensic reports, the testimonies of those who had known Yui Inoue. But on the other hand, there was the question of her mental state. Could a mother truly murder her children and not fully understand the consequences? The verdict, when it came, was clear. Yui Inoue was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of child abuse, and 1 count of disorderly conduct. But the true weight of the judgment came not just in the words of the court, but in the sentencing itself. On February 10, 2025, Inoue was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 35 years for the charges of child abuse and disorderly conduct. As the gavel struck, a sense of finality hung in the air. For the family of Mia and Kai, it was justice, but it could never bring them back. In her final words, Inoue was defiant. She denied ever committing the murders, claiming, "My children are still alive. They're with my parents, and they're safe. You're all wrong." The courtroom fell silent as her words echoed through the hall, a final denial of the truth that had been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. Was this a woman still lost in her delusions? Or was it the cold voice of a woman unwilling to accept the horror of what she had done? The sentencing left the public divided. Some felt pity for a woman who had fallen through the cracks of a broken mental health system. Others, however, were firm in their belief that she should be held accountable for her actions, regardless of the state of her mind. The media frenzy was immediate. Some praised the conviction as a necessary step in the pursuit of justice for Mia and Kai, while others used the case to advocate for better mental health care, citing the many signs that had been ignored over the years. But for Mia and Kai's community, the wounds were still fresh, the pain still palpable. The faces of 2 innocent children would never be forgotten, and their story would serve as a grim reminder of what happens when warning signs go unnoticed. And yet, despite the finality of the trial, the questions lingered. Could the tragedy have been avoided? Was there a moment when Yui Inoue could have been saved, or when Mia and Kai could have been spared? These questions will haunt the community forever. The story of Mia and Kai is a heartbreaking reminder of how easily warning signs can be ignored, how the cries for help can sometimes go unnoticed until it's too late. It's a tragedy that has left its mark on all who have heard it, but it also serves as a cautionary tale, one that reminds us of the importance of paying attention to the struggles of those around us. Too often, people in crisis slip through the cracks of a system meant to protect them, and too often, those who are most vulnerable are left to suffer in silence. This is a tragedy that was preventable, but only if the signs had been heeded and the support systems put in place sooner. As we reflect on what happened, we must remember the importance of supporting families in crisis, of ensuring that those who are struggling mentally, emotionally, or financially have access to the help they need. Whether it's a mother facing mental health challenges, a child who needs protection, or a family caught in the grip of domestic violence, we all play a role in looking out for one another. It's up to all of us to create communities where no one is forced to suffer in isolation, where no one feels that they have no choice but to act in desperation. As we close, let us take a moment of silence to remember Mia and Kai, 2 innocent lives who deserved so much more. Their names will live on, and their story will continue to remind us of the changes that need to be made in order to protect the most vulnerable among us. If you or someone you know is struggling, please know that there is help. Domestic violence and mental health challenges are issues that affect many, but there is always support available. You don't have to go through this alone. If you or someone you know needs help, there are resources you can reach out to. Domestic violence hotlines, mental health services, and local organizations are all here to offer assistance, whether it's through counseling, shelters, or emergency services. Please don't wait. Reach out and get the support you need. Remember, the road to healing begins with a single step, and it's never too late to ask for help. If you found this video meaningful and want to stay informed about similar stories and important discussions, please consider subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you'll help us continue to bring attention to cases that matter and share vital resources for those in need. Your support means a lot in our efforts to make a difference. Thank you for watching, and remember, you're not alone. There is always help available.